Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Matot, and in the sefer that is Daf Reish Samech Aleph. We're in Os Beis, section 2. In the beginning of our Parsha, in the beginning of Parsha Matos, the Torah talks about taking vows and oaths and the importance of fulfilling a vow whenever we take one. And the Zera Shimshon is going to discuss a piece of that issue, specifically what happens if a person wants to take a vow to do a mitzvah, and he's going to get into that question. So he begins Os Beis Nishbati va'akayemo lishmor mishpetei chukecha. This is a pasuk from Tehillim, and the pasuk says, David HaMelech says, "I took an oath and I will fulfill to guard the mitzvos, the commandments of your statutes, the laws of your statutes." So the reason I think the Zera Shimshon starts with that pasuk, even though it's obviously not a pasuk from the Parsha, it's a pasuk from Tehillim, is because it introduces his topic perfectly, which is the topic of taking an oath or taking a vow to keep a mitzvah. So let's see where he goes, what sources he wants to share with us. Kosav HaShulchan Aruch Reish Hilchos Nedarim. So the Zera Shimshon starts with the Shulchan Aruch and the beginning of Hilchos Nedarim, and the Shulchan Aruch there says, Tzarech lizaher shelo lidur shum dar. A person should be careful not to take any vows. Va'afilu tzedakah ein tov lidor v'chulei. And even if it's a vow to give charity, which we would think is a very good, admirable, laudatory thing to do, the Shulchan Aruch says it's not good to take a vow. Don't take vows about anything, even to give tzedakah, even to give charity. Visham v'sif vav, and then a little later after that statement, the Shulchan Aruch says, Ha'omer eshna perik zeh. Let's say a person says, I'm going to learn a perik of Torah, a chapter of Torah study, a perik in Chumash, a perik in Nach, a perik in Mishnayos, a perik in Gemara. A person says, I'm going to study a perik of Torah study. V'yorei shema yisrashel badavar, and the person is concerned that maybe he'll be lazy about it. After he said he was going to do it and committed to do it, he or she felt like, you know what, I feel like I'm not going to have the strength and the discipline to follow through. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Shari le lemindar, it is permissible for this person to take a vow, lizruze nafshe, in order to motivate himself to fulfill the commitment that he or she made to study Torah. So let's pause here for a moment. There is an implied question here, which the Zera Shimshon doesn't spell out, but he expects us to understand it on our own. And that question is that it looks like there's an apparent contradiction between the first statement the Shulchan Aruch made and the second statement he made a little bit later. The first statement said a person should not vow even to give tzedakah. Then the Shulchan Aruch said a person is allowed to take a vow to study Torah if they want to motivate themselves and strengthen their commitment to study a certain section of Torah, a certain chapter of Torah, then they are allowed to take a vow. So the obvious question is, how come taking a vow to study Torah is permissible, and how come taking a vow to give charity, the Shulchan Aruch said, no, don't do that. That's not permissible. That's the question. Because of Hataz, and we're now in the top of the second column. And the Taz, one of the famous, the Turei Zohav, one of the famous commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, wrote about this question. It would appear that there's a difference between taking a vow for charity and taking a vow to study Torah. Ki yitzro shel adam miskaber alav yoser bin nesinas mamon. Because a person's Yetzer Hara is stronger in terms of preventing him from doing something that involves giving money, midavar hatoloi b'tzorach gufo, more than something that would involve his body in doing something, a physical activity. And here the Taz is considering studying Torah a physical activity, an action that a person can take. And since a person's Yetzer Hara, the Taz says, since a person's Yetzer Hara is stronger and will fight against him more to prevent him from giving his money to tzedakah, than from doing a mitzvah with his body, such as studying Torah. Therefore, we have to be more concerned about giving charity, sheyavor al nidro, that a person will violate his neder, mineder sha'al Torah, more than a vow that a person took to study Torah. Ad kan lashono, until here is the language of the Taz. And in a moment, we'll go over and repeat and explain exactly how the Taz answered our question. But first, I do want to say that tonight's learning, we're dedicating tonight's learning Eloi Nishmas Esther Bat Shlomo. That is the beloved mother of Ariella Geller, who passed away a couple of days ago. So our learning tonight is Eloi Nishmasa. It should be an elevation for her neshama. So the Taz answers the question and says, the reason the Shulchan Aruch said it's okay to take a vow to study Torah, but not okay to take a vow to give tzedakah, is that there's a tremendous Yetzer Hara fighting against a person giving tzedakah, and it's very hard for a person to overcome that. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch says, don't take a vow because you're going to have a big battle on your hands and you might not fulfill your vow to give to tzedakah. However, there's less of a fight against something that a person can do himself that doesn't involve financial matters, doesn't involve his money, such as studying Torah. There's less of a battle, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said it's okay to take a vow in that case because it's more likely that you'll be able to follow through and keep your word, keep your vow, and we're less concerned that you will not study the Torah that you committed to study. That's the answer of the Taz. And now the Zera Shimshon continues. Vehalach, and the Lechem Chamudos, another commentary, Kosav, al zeh shedivrei hataz, Kosav al zeh, he wrote about this, shedivrei hataz dechuyim, that the words of the Turei Zohav, the explanation that we just discussed, that the Taz brought about this seeming contradiction in the Shulchan Aruch, really need to be pushed away. They need to be rejected because they're not correct. Why not? From something that the Gemara says in Masechta Brachos, Godol hatanis yoser min hatzdaka. The Gemara in Masechta Brachos says that fasting is greater than giving charity. Shezeh begufo, because this one, the fast, involves the person's body. V'zeh b'mamono, and this one involves the person's money. So the Gemara is saying it's a greater thing to do to involve your body and fasting than it is to give money to charity, which only doesn't involve your physical self. It only involves your money. Hare, behold, the Yoser kosher al ha'adam, the Lechem Chamudo says, this shows you that it's harder for a person, lasos mitzvah begufo, to do a mitzvah with his body, yoser mibamono, more than with his money, which is the opposite of the reasoning that the Taz gave a moment ago. So what we have here is an argument between commentators. One commentator, the Taz, said, I understand exactly why the Shulchan Aruch said what he said, and he distinguished between tzedakah and learning Torah, because it's very hard for a person to give money, and there's a big battle with the Yetzer Hara over that, and it's easier for a person to study Torah bigufo with his body. And then the Lechem Chamudos came along and said, I have a Gemara that says the exact opposite of your reasoning. And the Gemara says it's harder to do something with your body, and therefore fasting, a tinus which involves your body, is actually a greater merit because it's harder than giving tzedakah, which only involves your money. Umishum hachi, because of this point, which the Lach felt went against and disproved the Taz, Tiritzu, he gave his own answer to the question. So just to make sure we're on the same page, the Lach has rejected the Taz's reasoning based on the Gemara in Brachos, and now he's going to suggest his own explanation as to why the Shulchan Aruch distinguished between making a vow to give tzedakah, which he was not in favor of, and making a vow to study Torah, which the Shulchan Aruch did permit. So continuing, my diamrinu beperik kama detainis. We have to look at, in order to understand this, we need to look at a Gemara in the first parak of Masechta Tainis. Bimei Rabbi Zera, in the days of Rabbi Zera, the Gemara says, Gozor Gezera Delo Lemesiv Tanesa V'chuli. The authorities, the non-Jewish authority, presumably the Roman authorities, made a gezerah that you could not fast. Jews were not allowed to fast at this time during the days of Rabbi Zera. And the Zera Shimshon leaves out the rest of the story, but what happens over there is Rabbi Zera said, let us accept upon ourselves to fast, even though we're not going to be able to actually fast at this time while the government prohibition is in place. But let's accept upon ourselves to fast. Let's make it as if, do everything we can to make it as if to show we would fast if we could, in order to make this gezerah go away. And then Rabbi Zera said, in the zuchus of that, our desire and our willingness to accept upon ourselves a fast, hopefully then the government decree will be annulled, min hashamayim, will be annulled from above, and we'll be able actually to then go ahead and carry out the fast. That's the story that the Gemara tells. Im kain, if so, kishachoshav lasos mitzvah nechshav kilu nases. From that we see the idea that if a person wants to do it, thinks about doing a mitzvah, commits to doing a mitzvah, it's as if the mitzvah was done. Why? Because all they did at that time was accept upon themselves to do a fast, to declare and to carry out a public fast day, but they knew they wouldn't be able to actually do it at that time. Nonetheless, because they thought about it and committed themselves to it, they were given the merit as if they had done it, and then ultimately the government's decree was in fact abolished. So therefore, the Lach starts off by saying, you see from that Gemara this idea that when a person plans to do a mitzvah, it's as if the person did the mitzvah. Ve'amrinon besota, and we say, and another Gemara in Masechta Sota, the mitzvah atzule lo mitzala miyetzer hara, that when a person does a mitzvah, it does not necessarily protect him or her from the yetzer hara. V'hatorah, but if the person studies Torah, mitzala, then it does protect the person from the yetzer hara. The Gemara over there is discussing what kind of protection a person gets when he or she does a mitzvah, what kind of, in general, a general mitzvah, and what kind of protection a person gets when he or she studies Torah. Does the protection, whatever type it might be, and there are different types of protection the Gemara is talking about over there, does it apply only when they're doing the mitzvah? Does it apply even after they stop doing the mitzvah? But in the course of that conversation, the Gemara says, or at least one opinion in the Gemara says, that doing a mitzvah doesn't give you a protection against the yetzer hara. So a person can do a mitzvah and then still have that yetzer hara, boom, the second he finishes the mitzvah, hit him and try and prevent him from doing another mitzvah. Whereas if a person studies Torah, that does provide protection against the yetzer hara. That's what the Gemara in Masechta Sota says. V'lochein, and therefore, beneder tzedakah, going back to the Shulchan Aruch's case of a person who took a vow to give charity, yesh lochu shema ya'akveno yitzro. We do have to be concerned that the person's yetzer hara will prevent him from carrying out his vow to give charity. Milakayim haneder, from fulfilling the vow. Ve'ein lo lidor, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said he shouldn't take the vow. Omnum, however, beneder shel Torah, but if a person wants to make a vow to study Torah, ein lachush, we don't have to be concerned that the person's yetzer hara will prevent them. Why? Because the study of Torah does provide protection against the yetzer hara. V'lochein huter lo lidor, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch permitted a person to take a vow to study Torah. Shahat Torah atzule matzle, because the Torah, the commitment to study Torah, will protect the person. V'lo yitkafenu yitzro, and the person's yetzer hara will not overpower him. Lehisrashel, to be lazy. Milakayim haneder, from fulfilling the vow. Ad kan lishono bikitzur, here until here is the language of the lach, the lechem chamudos, in a short form. So let's understand this answer that we're being given, and keep in mind what we have really structurally is the Shulchan Aruch saying two statements that seem like an apparent contradiction. The Taz gave his answer, and now the Lechem Chamudos is giving his answer, which is, in a nutshell, that tzedakah and Torah are different. Why? Because tzedakah, as well as other mitzvos, does not provide protection against the Yetzer Hara, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch cautioned and said, don't take a vow to give tzedakah. Why? Because you have no protection against the Yetzer Hara in this particular mitzvah of giving tzedakah, and therefore you're going to have a fight on your hands to proceed and give the tzedakah, and you might not be able to actually, you might lose the battle against the Yetzer Hara and not give the tzedakah, and therefore don't take a vow. And on the other hand, in terms of studying Torah, there is a protection that comes with that to help you fight against the Yetzer Hara, and therefore we're less concerned that you won't follow through and fulfill your vow, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said it's okay to make the vow. So we have two different approaches given here, offered here, to understand the Shulchan Aruch when he forbade taking a vow to give tzedakah, but permitted taking a vow to study Torah. And now the Zera Shimshon is going to comment on this, on all of this at the bottom of the second column. Uladidon, and according to us, the Zera Shimshon, when he says that, means according to his way of thinking, his way of reasoning. Eino kusha kol kach. This question that the Lach asked on the Taz is not such a strong question. Sha'af al pisha matzinu, even though it's true that we found in that Gemara in Brachos, she'gadol tainis yoser min tzedakah. Yes, of course, that Gemara said. We have to acknowledge that Gemara said that fasting is greater than giving tzedakah. Zehu lefi mai de'amrinu b'perek ches dekama. The Zera Shimshon says the reason it said that is actually based on a different point, which we see illustrated in Maseches Baba Kama in the 8th parak. Over there, and we're quoting from a Mishnah on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph, Shavar es Kadi, if a person says to another person, break my jug. I have a jug, and I tell somebody, for reasons we don't know why, I say, do me a favor, break this jug, break my jug, v'chule, etc. So the Mishnah says, if I say that to the person and they do it, they're chayiv to pay me for the jug, because they shouldn't have listened to me to break my property. However, if I say to the person, and what I'm explaining now, the Zera Shimshon doesn't quote, I'm explaining it so we understand the source the Mishnah that's being brought here. But if I say to the person, break my jug, and you won't have to pay for it, I'm making it explicitly clear that you can damage my property, break my property, and you won't have to pay for it, then the person, if he goes ahead and breaks the jug, he's putter, he's exempt. Now we're continuing. Shavar es yadai, however, if a person says to another person, break my hands, break the bones in my hands, kata es ragli, cut off my foot, v'chule. So let's say a person goes to an extreme and says, okay, you broke the jug, great, but now I want you to actually damage my physical body, break bones and do things like that. Then the person is chayiv. Then the person's chayiv, even if the man said to him, you won't have to pay any damages. I'm telling you, you don't need to know why, but break my arm, break my leg, do that, and you won't have to pay. I'm telling you up front, you don't have to pay. And the guy does it. That person who broke his bones is still chayiv to pay no matter what. Why? Because a person has the capacity to forgive pain that comes financially, meaning financial loss, v'lo al tzara de gufa, but a person does not forgive pain that is brought to his own body. And therefore, that helps us understand the Mishnah over there in Maseches Baba Kama as to why there's a difference in law when someone says, break this jug and you won't have to pay, in which case he in fact doesn't have to pay, or break a bone of mine and you won't have to pay, in which case the person is obligated to pay. Ubetainis, now the Zera Shimshon continues based on our understanding of that Mishnah in Baba Kama regarding a fast, yesh bo tsar haguf. A fast brings pain to the body. Ve'ein lo inyan lahacha klal. And that whole issue of pain or suffering to the body, as opposed to things that don't bring pain or suffering to the body, is not our question at all. That isn't relevant, as Zera Shimshon says, to our discussion about vows to do a mitzvah, whether it's a vow to give tzedakah, whether it's a vow to study Torah. That's a whole different question than the issue of physical pain to the body versus financial loss and the fact that it doesn't cause physical pain to the body. Shahare Khan, because over here, regarding our discussion, Hasafek Shelanu, the question that we have, the doubt that we have that we're trying to resolve, Hu im yaniach milasos oso hadavar bishvil hatoreach. Our question is, will a person be prevented from fulfilling his or her vow because of the tircha, because of the effort that needs to be expended to fulfill that vow? Ume'ata, and from now, toreach haTorah, the effort that needs to be expended to study Torah, Adarabba, just the opposite, meaning it's not a painful thing at all, just the opposite. Misameches leiv. It actually brings joy, it brings simcha to a person's heart. Dichsiv, based on a pasuk in Tehillim, Pekudei Hashem Yesharim Misamchei leiv. The laws of Hashem are straight, and they bring rejoicing when you study them. They bring joy to the heart. V'hatzdaka eino kol kach misameches. But giving tzedakah doesn't bring nearly as much joy as studying Torah. Why? Because when we give tzedakah, we need to be grateful for the swindlers and cheaters who actually are not really poor, but they're acting as if they're poor to get money. And of course, that's a strange expression to say we need to be grateful to them, which we'll explain in a moment. But for now, let's just understand it to mean as if it said, we need to take into account, we need to be cognizant of the fact that some of the people collecting tzedakah are charlatans. And every time a person gives tzedakah, he has to be concerned that perhaps the individual he's giving it to is not appropriate, is not actually a poor person, and therefore he's not really getting credit for a mitzvah. He's not really doing a mitzvah. He's helping someone who doesn't need his assistance. The person is a fake. And this helps us understand the reasoning of the Taz that was attacked by the Lechem Chamudos. So from the Zera Shimshon's perspective, we've answered the question. We've explained the Gemara in Brachos that was used as an attack by the Lechem Chamudos on the reasoning of the Taz, and the Zera Shimshon says, now we understand the Taz is okay, and we've answered the question that was asked on him, so his position has been reestablished and is fine. Now let me just go back for a moment to explain the strange expression about lahachzik tova, to show gratitude to the swindlers. So that Gemara in Ksubas, it's a Gemara in Masechta Ksubas, makes a very interesting comment, and what it says is as follows: that it tells a story about a person who was going to give tzedakah or gave tzedakah and made a comment about fakers. It bothers him that there are these charlatans who don't really need the money. And I'm sorry, actually the Gemara talks about a man, the wife of a man who gave tzedakah. There was a certain Amora who gave tzedakah to a person on a weekly basis, I think every Erev Shabbos. And one time he couldn't go, so he sent his wife. So his wife came back and she said to him, well, that's not a person you really need to be supporting on a weekly basis. And he said, what makes you say that? He's a very poor, my understanding is he's a very poor person. And so the wife said, well, when I got to the house, he wasn't outside. And as I'm waiting outside, I hear them talking about which kinds of tablecloth they're going to use, the silver tablecloth or the gold tablecloth, which kind of fancy dishes are they going to use, what kind of fancy tablets and silverware are they going to use. And it became very clear based on what I overheard standing outside waiting for the man to come out that these are wealthy people and they certainly don't need the charity that you've been giving this person. So the Amora, of course, was not happy about that. So he quoted a statement, the statement that the Zera Shimshon just brought down, which is we actually have to be grateful for these swindlers. Why? Because the fact that they exist is the only answer we can give to Hashem when Hashem says to us after 120 years, when Hashem judges us, Hashem's definitely going to say, there were poor people all around you. There are poor people everywhere in the world, destitute, poor, suffering people. Why didn't you do more to help them? Why didn't you do more to support them? So the Amora said, how is it, can any person answer that question, except they have one little answer. And the little answer they can give is that because some of these poor people are actually fakes, I wasn't sure exactly how much to give and who to give and when to give. And so therefore, that's the only little bit of an answer we can give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as to why we didn't do more and more to help take care of supporting the Aniyim. And so we have to show gratitude to them. That's what the Gemara in Ksubis is talking about. What the Zera Shimshon is talking about is that is helping us understand why, when it comes to the vow to give tzedakah, we might be prevented from doing so. And his answer is, for the Taz, his answer is that we can be ambivalent about giving tzedakah in general, and our Yetzer Hara can really use that to fight against us. Whereas studying Torah brings us joy, it makes us happy to study Torah, and therefore there's less of a resistance. It's more likely that we'll fulfill our vow, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said a vow is okay. Now, at this point, what the Zera Shimshon wants to do is continue, and now he's going to turn his attention to the Lechem Chamudos in his answer and explain why he doesn't feel it's a satisfactory answer. And then this will lead him to where he kind of reformulates the whole issue and gives his own explanation to the apparent contradiction in the Shulchan Aruch that we started with. But first, let's hear what he says about the Lechem Chamudos. Aval, but Mashitirates, who on what he, the Lechem Chamudos, answered, Yesh lahakshos alav. We really could ask a question on it. Sha'adarabba, just the opposite of what he suggested. Why? Lefi shahatorah matzla ein sorech lidor. He suggested that if the Torah protects a person, then they should be allowed to take a vow. And the Zera Shimshon says it's just the opposite. If the Torah, studying Torah protects a person, then they shouldn't even need to take a vow because there's no Yetzer Hara fighting against them to stop them from studying Torah. Umatzinu de Parach HaGemara Nedarim, and we find that in Masechta Nedarim, the Gemara asks a question. Al Hahi de Rav Gidl, on a statement made by Rav Gidl, Minayin Shenishboyin Lekayim HaMitzvah. From where do we know that a person can take an oath to fulfill a mitzvah? So Rav Gidl said, Ha-omer eshna perek zeh, if a person says, I am going to learn a perek of Torah, then he can, and he wants to, he can turn that into an oath and swear that he's going to learn that section of Torah, v'chule, etc. V'halo, and the Gemara says, but isn't it true, mushbo v'omed mehar Sinai, who this person, as all Jews have taken an oath on Har Sinai to keep all of the mitzvos in the Torah. The Gemara is presenting the idea, the concept, that the neshamas of all of the Jewish people, even future generations for all time, were present at Har Sinai and were included in the commitment that the Jewish people, that Bnei Yisrael, made to keep the mitzvos of the Torah. Nasev and Nishma, we all said that together. The people, Bnei Yisrael that was there at the time, and the neshamas of future, all of the future members of Bnei Yisrael were there, and they made that commitment. And we have a rule that if you already have taken an oath, then another oath is not valid about the same matter. If a person has already taken an oath, ein shvua chalal shvua. We don't take an oath about something that has already been sworn upon. So therefore, the Gemara is saying, Rav Gidl, why are you saying that a person can take an oath to study Torah when studying Torah is a mitzvah, and we all already took an oath to accept all of the mitzvahs in the Torah? So it should be a case of not allowing us to do so, to take another oath about that. Umitartzin on Hasam, in the Gemara over there answers, Ha Kamash Malan, what Rav Gidl is coming to teach us is the Shari Leila Inish Lizruze Nafshe, that it is permissible for a person to take an oath in order to motivate himself. That means, yes, even though it's true that technically speaking, an oath taken on something that has already been sworn about is not technically validated, it's not technically valid. Nonetheless, we allow a person to take an oath to motivate himself and stimulate himself to do a certain mitzvah that he committed to do. Ve'im b'Torah, and if we're talking about studying Torah, ein locha sheyidkafenu yitzra. According to the Lach, there's no concern that the person's Yetzer Hara will overpower him. Ein lo lasos tshuva al shvua. And therefore, it would not make sense for the Gemara to allow, for Rav Gidl to allow this person to take an oath on something that he already swore about. Because what's our concern? That he's doing it to motivate himself? He doesn't have a Yetzer Hara to fight against, according to the reasoning that the Lechem Chamudos was resting upon. The im bishar mitzvos. Now, if you switch and look at other mitzvos besides the study of Torah, yesh lochosh yetkafenu yitro. There we do have a valid concern that the person's Yetzer Hara will overpower him. Adarabba, and therefore just the opposite. Hayilo lidor. A person should be allowed to take an oath regarding other mitzvos besides the study of Torah, hidei lizruze nashe, in order to motivate himself to fulfill it. Now, but the Gemara itself did not say that. The Gemara was talking about a person being allowed to take an oath to study Torah. And the Shulchan Aruch clearly said that you can take an oath to study Torah, but not to give tzedakah. And so therefore the Zera Shimshon is saying what we're seeing in the actual sources doesn't fit with the reasoning that the Lechem Chamudos gave. And therefore he feels there's a strong question on the position of the Lechem Chamudos, and he's going to continue with that now. And even if we say, like the reasoning, even if we go for a moment like the reasoning of the Lechem Chamudos that we mentioned before, that in a case where we're afraid the person will overpower him, then we shouldn't let a person take an oath. This is not going to turn out, this is not going to be a valid answer. Shahari Lidvorov, according to his words, Lo Hutter Lidor Lizruze Nafshe Ela Beneder Shel Torah. According to his position, it would only come out the only time that we should be allowed to take a vow to do a mitzvah would be if it's specifically the mitzvah of studying Torah. V'zehu hefech dasa Shulchan Aruch, and this is actually the opposite of what the Shulchan Aruch's real position is, and we're going to see there's more to see in the Shulchan Aruch. V'hefech ha'emes, and this is also the opposite of the true halacha. The Gemara, because in the Gemara, I'm reading on the Gemara we just quoted about Rav Gidl, we say, Minayin shenishboin l'kaimes ha-mitzvos. The Gemara says, from where do we know that you can take an oath to fulfill mitzvos? V'hainu stam mitzvah, and it just mentions the word mitzvah plainly without specifying a specific mitzvah. The hainu kol ha-mitzvos, which means it's referring to all of the mitzvos. So that Gemara, when it discusses taking an oath to study Torah, it also talks about taking an oath to do any particular mitzvah, whatever mitzvah we might be referring to. It's talking about being allowed to do so in order to motivate oneself. And also in the Shulchan Aruch, in the part that we quoted earlier, he continues on, and this is what he says: if a person is afraid that his Yetzer Hara will overpower him, and he will be, and his Yetzer Hara will convince him, persuade him to violate a negative commandment in the Torah. Or the Yetzer Hara will prevent him and get him to be lazy about doing a mitzvah saseh. So either this person's Yetzer Hara is trying to push him into violating a law of the Torah, or it's trying to hold him back and prevent him from fulfilling a mitzvah in the Torah that he's obligated to do. Mitzvah lishava v'lidor, then it becomes a mitzvah on this person to take an oath or a vow, kedei lezares atzmo, in order to motivate and stimulate himself to do the right thing, either to refrain from committing an avera or to go ahead and perform and fulfill the mitzvah. Ad kan lashono, until here is the language of the Shulchan Aruch that we didn't see before, but now the Zera Shimshon tells it to us. Ha kamon, so we see right in front of us from this quote, Shebachala mitzvos shari lidor lizruze nashe, that regarding all mitzvos, the Shulchan Aruch would allow a person to take a vow in order to stimulate himself. Afal pi de mitzvah atzule lo mitzala, even though we said that the Gemara said that we quoted previously, a mitzvah doesn't protect a person from the Yetzer Hara. Nonetheless, the Zera Shimshon says, we can see in the Halacha and the Shulchan Aruch that still we can take a vow for these mitzvahs. Now, the Zera Shimshon assumes that in your mind, you're thinking, wait a minute. We haven't forgotten that the Shulchan Aruch specifically said you shouldn't take a vow to give tzedakah. That was the whole point. That was the whole apparent contradiction. So he's going to deal with that point right now. Vehein emes, and this is the true position. Shelefize gam letam hataz kosher. According to what we're seeing now, that the Shulchan Aruch holds that a person can take a vow to fulfill any mitzvah, again, keeping tzedakah in abeyance for a moment, the mitzvah of tzedakah. Shaharei, this becomes a problem for the Taz himself. Shaharei mipshata Shulchan Aruch nira shebachol mitzvah shari lizruzei nafshe. Because the Shulchan Aruch is saying you can, it's permissible to take the vow to strengthen yourself. V'yesh mitzvos hatluyos b'mamon. And of course, there are mitzvos that do involve a monetary commitment. Kigon sukkah, for example, the money that a person expends to put up a sukkah. V'lulav, and the money that a person spends to buy a lulav, uchiyotze, and similar to this. So the Zera Shimshon says, I originally defended the Taz from the attack of the Lach. Then I showed there were problems in the Lach's position, and now he says I have to admit that there are problems in the Taz's position as well. So how do we ultimately explain this apparent contradiction in the Shulchan Aruch? And here he comes to do that. The Yesh Lomar Didavka b'mitzvahs hatzdaka lo shari lidor. What we need to say is that specifically in regard to one mitzvah, the mitzvah of giving charity, it is not permissible to take a vow, lizruze nashe, for a person to motivate himself to do that mitzvah. But that's the only exception. For all other mitzvahs, not just studying Torah, but for all other mitzvahs, a person may take a vow to motivate himself to keep that mitzvah, but not for giving tzedakah. Mitam de amrina b'perakama de Rosh Hashanah. And this is based on a statement in the first parak of Maseches Rosh Hashanah. Over there, the Gemara quotes a pasuk in Sefer Devarim, which talks about the importance of keeping the things that we say, the promises or commitments that we verbalize. The Gemara quotes a pasuk that talks about making sure to keep those things. And the last word in that pasuk is beficha, with your mouth. And the Gemara says, beficha, what does it mean with your mouth? Zu tzedakah. This is a reference to a vow that a person articulates to give charity, v'chule, etc. And now the Gemara, he continues quoting from that Gemara. The tzedakah mechayev aleha le'alter. And when a person makes a vow to give tzedakah, he or she becomes obligated to do so le'alter, immediately. Dahakaime aniyim, because there are poor people present everywhere. In other words, according to that Gemara, tzedakah is unique in the sense that it always applies and can be fulfilled at any time. So the moment that a person takes a vow to give tzedakah, he or she is expected to immediately go about fulfilling that vow. It's different from other mitzvos, which the Torah understands may or may not be able to be done right away, but the prevalence, the ubiquity of aniyim, of poor people and destitute people, makes it so that we're expected to give tzedakah right away. V'im kain, and if so, if this is true, once we understand this reality, that tzedakah ein lo zman lehisakev, then regarding tzedakah, there's no period of time at which we should be concerned that the person's Yetzer Hara is going to come along and prevent them from doing it, because they can do it right away. There's no reason to delay. V'hu hadin b'nidrei hektish, and the same rule would apply for a neder that a person is going to make that has to do with hektish, donations to the Beis HaMikdash. Masha ein kain, but this does not apply shar mitzvos, with other mitzvos. Sheyesh lahem zman, which there is time. For example, kol hayom, many mitzvos, a person can say, I'm going to do a mitzvah, and that mitzvah could apply all day. They're not expected to fulfill that mitzvah at that exact moment because they have time, generally speaking, to do the mitzvah. Or it's possible that a person will make a vow to do a mitzvah before the time of that mitzvah can come at all, and so therefore the person can't do the mitzvah. So just to give an example, let's imagine that in the past a person has not been careful about, let's say, lighting Shabbos candles or Hanukkah candles, and a person wants to strengthen himself or herself and takes a vow to do it appropriately in the best way and in the proper time. Well, if it's not Friday afternoon at the time to light Shabbos candles, or it's not Hanukkah time, the person can't fulfill the mitzvah. So then obviously there's no expectation and certainly no obligation for them to immediately fulfill the mitzvah that they just took a vow to do properly. Umishum hachi, and therefore hutor lidor lizruze nafshe. Therefore, the Shulchan Aruch permits a person to take a vow to strengthen himself or herself to do those kinds of mitzvahs. Va'af b'Torah, and even regarding Torah study, where you may say it's just like tzedakah. The second you say you're going to study Torah, you should start studying Torah. Yesh zman. There's also time when a person can legitimately say, I need to delay. Sherashai lehispatel, a person can be permitted to do other things besides study Torah. As the pasuk in the Torah itself says, "V'asafta deganecha," you should gather in your grain, meaning that the Torah understands that even though there's a command to study Torah at all, as much as we possibly can, we also have to make a living. We have to have support our family. We have to bring in the crops, and there are other legitimate things that a person needs to do on a daily basis that would prevent the person from studying Torah at exactly that moment. So here the Zera Shimshon has concluded with a new concept, and his new concept is to say that we have to put aside the reasoning of the Taz, and we have to put aside the reasoning of the Lach, and we have to look at the full statement of the Shulchan Aruch and see that what comes out is that a person is allowed to take a net or a vow to do a particular mitzvah, and this would apply to all of the mitzvahs of the Torah, with the exception of giving tzedakah, or he added making a donation to Hektish in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Anything that a person would be obligated to do immediately, and there would be nothing preventing them from doing it immediately, then the Shulchan Aruch says don't take a vow in a case like that, but do take a vow in cases where regular mitzvahs as the ones that he explained. It goes without saying that nothing that we're learning tonight should be viewed as halacha l'maisa, even though the Zera Shimshon is quoting pieces from the Shulchan Aruch. We certainly know you can't just look at a couple of, hear about or learn about a couple of things in the Shulchan Aruch and assume that's halacha l'maisa. So if anyone has specific halachic questions, they should consult a halachic authority about those questions. But we certainly can take away from the learning tonight that we see in the sources a tremendous sensitivity to the idea of being exceedingly careful about what we say, exceedingly careful about verbal commitments, and that it's best to refrain from making them, but that if we do have a legitimate need and a legitimate situation to make a vow or to make a commitment or a promise or things like that, that we must immediately do everything we can to fulfill and follow through on the commitment and the verbal commitment that we made. Yasher koach to everyone participating tonight, and looking forward to getting together again to study the Zera Shimshon next week.